We're in the Art Bridges storage room looking at this beautiful abstract painting from the late 1970s by Alex Janvier.
I think that this is animated by all kinds of very powerful tensions. A lot of these tensions stem back, I think, to the biography of Alex. He was born on the Cold Lake First Nation ancestral homeland, and he was one of the sons of the last customary chief of the Cold Lake First Nation. But when he was almost 8 years old, he was forcefully removed from his homeland and forced to go to the Blue Quills Residential School of Alberta. And this was a profoundly traumatic experience. He was in there for more than 11 years.
He would spend summers with his family.
He grew up in this moral tension whereby during the majority of the year he'd be in this very strict Catholic school. He was constantly being told that his family and his grandparents were evil, if not the actual devil, and that there was a certain kind of life that he needed to aspire to and that it was not his native life. He later on described art as a savior during this period of his life. Even though this school was so detrimental to his upbringing, it was also there that his talents were first recognized. He was actually taught by a German emigre, Carlo Altenburg, who studied at the Dortmund Art Academy, which he described as essentially a copycat of the Bauhaus. So you have, of course, this profound and very deliberate understanding of the visual grammar of the Bauhaus. But at the same time, you have this other stream of the Bauhaus that is best personified by Wassily Kandinsky, who sought to recuperate what he regarded as the spiritual, most notably in his 1911 text concerning the spiritual in art, where he talks about color as being able to affect an almost physical reaction. This understanding of humans as being endowed with a suprasensorial sensibility that is able to capture things that are beyond the visual spectrum. And so early on, we see this deliberate attempt on his part to synthesize both the Western art education that he is receiving at the school with his own indigenous cosmology and his own understanding of visual culture.
And he talks so much about the importance of the landscape that he grew up in and the importance of nature. And I begin to see that here when I look closely at the forms. I feel like I see reptiles or fish, and we have these shapes that feel as though something is growing, a leaf, a sprout, something that transforms into something else.
The title of this painting, Lakeshore Life, immediately remits us back to that ancestral homeland. So we might see some of these flowing lines as tributaries that are feeding their life into the river, carving bluffs into the landscape, carving stream beds into the landscape. But it's very fluid and it's very shifting. Janvier has actually been described as reminiscent of ballet. There's something obviously very fluid, but also very elegant. There's a ton of movement in the work. There's this swirling motion towards the center of it, but it all feels very rhythmic. He gave an interview shortly before painting this work where he described his vision as the dream of a hunter's son. He was talking about the kind of sensibility that his father, a hunter, would have had to have in his attunement to the landscape and his attunement to the changing seasons. And a lot of that knowledge would come in dreams. This might strike a Western viewer as something very foreign, but this would have been something that would have been extremely intimate to Janvier, something that he would have been very attuned to with his own understanding of Kandinsky and this notion of a suprasensible capability of seeing things. In that same text, Kandinsky describes artists as dreamers and seers. For a young Alex Janvier, this would have been a perfectly normal notion of the understanding of certain people within the community as endowed with the capability to see beyond and to feel beyond what the rest of the people can see and feel.
The blues that read as water, the greens that read a little bit also like water or vegetation, and then these yellows and oranges almost like the gravitational center of this canvas.
During this time, he participated in the Indian Claims Commission, and as part of that, he would have helped elders in his tribe draw maps that would have allowed them to lay claim to certain parts of their ancestral homeland that were also the object of seizure by the Canadian authorities. And so this negotiation that is happening as well. He was a politically active artist. He was one of the founding members of one of the first Indigenous artist collective, the so-called Indian Group of Seven. He was perhaps one of the first indigenous artists to graduate from a formal art school. So his life was one of enormous political action. And I think that even though it's not immediately evident in the work, that act of synthesizing a form of knowledge and a cosmology that for years and years he was told was evil and was disparaged against, to synthesize that and to depict an ancestral homeland that he was oftentimes barred from living in, I think is a profoundly impactful project.